we're coming into a conversation that's twofold. One, we're talking about a pre-9/11 CIA. Pre-9/11, post-9/11 is important to create a distinction for CIA because prior to September 11th, CIA was a small, highly funded organization with very little oversight. They could come up with crazy stuff like trying to poison Fidel Castro so his beard fell out, or trying to create the Bay of Pigs invasion, or trying to do all sorts of wacky stuff from, MK Ultra to whatever else. That was a wacky, pre-9/11, unsupervised, Wild West kind of CIA. Post 9/11, the 9/11 Commission, written in 2003, highlighted that CIA failed to do its job for September 11th. So now there's tons of oversight. It's now a very large, very fat, well-funded bureaucracy, whereas before it was a well-funded free-for-all.
If it was a conspiracy, which department or which organization would be responsible, in your opinion?
If it was a conspiracy, there would be no department in charge of the conspiracy.
So it would be something else.
Correct. Right. Because when governments act, when individuals in a government act in a conspiratorial manner, it's not formalized. If it was formalized, it would be a policy, right? They act independently. And there's all sorts of instances where people act independently, from Edward Snowden all the way to Aldrich Ames, right? There are people who actually carried out conspiratorial efforts to try to gain some kind of leverage that worked for them for a while and then worked against them.
If that bullet had hit Donald Trump in the head, how do you think the US would be different? I was thinking about this when I was driving down the street yesterday.
It's hard to define that, really.
I was thinking we probably wouldn't be sat here now because there probably would have been quite a bit of unrest potentially. Potentially, I don't know.
I don't know. Like, it would have, I think we would have still been sitting here.
I was wondering.
I would have gotten my ass on a plane to come sit with you at least.
Well,
sure.
I know, right? So you never know how these sort of domino effects can happen and people can break out on the streets. And, because what might happen, let's just play out this scenario. Donald Trump gets shot, then some crazy right-wing person comes out and shoots someone else.
Mm.
And then the streets of LA look very different to the streets of LA today. And we're sat here in LA. So do you know what I mean? That's kind of the domino effect that's playing out in my mind. There'd be some kind of revenge, right?
Well, I don't know. That's what's interesting. So politically motivated violence is tough. If Donald Trump would have been shot, chances are the shooter would have also been shot. So from the eyes of the American people, and for sure from the messaging that would have come from the White House, the threat was neutralized, and it's a tragedy that we lost a former American president. Joe Biden would have come out and would have made kind, caring remarks about Donald Trump. Nobody would be talking about him as crazy or whatever else. He'd go down as a hero following the democratic process for something he believed in. History would have been written a very different way.
Oh, I don't know. Because I think if Donald Trump had been hit, I mean, this is just from chilling on Twitter. If Donald Trump had been hit, regardless of whether that kid had been shot, and regardless of whatever, people would have believed that it was some kind of deep state, CIA, left-wing, Hillary Clinton involvement. Even if there was a body, fingerprints, and they found the kid's hard drive and he was planning it, there's a group of people that still would have believed that. Absolutely, because there's a group of people, as you know, that believe anything.
Correct.
And that group, someone in that group of people would have taken a retaliatory action. And then this starts the stone throwing that I think. So they would have, gone, they might have gone to a left-wing, I don't know, black event, festival, and done something, and then you have the
tit for tat.
Mm.
I don't disagree that it's a possibility, but the question is whether or not a group would have reached critical mass to take some kind of action.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Because think about the alternative. The alternative is the streets of, you name the conservative state, Texas, Florida, whatever, Pennsylvania maybe, a giant parade fit for a king, right? Parading Donald Trump through the streets, something to keep, and Joe Biden happily endorsing the money for it to happen because he's an ex-president and because that's showing like unity and nationality. It could have been a chance to really bring the whole country together and end some of the bipolar division. There would have still been, just like you said, there would have been a group of people who believed in some sort of deep state action. And there may have been follow-up violence. You're right again. I think all of those things are possibilities, but it is also a possibility that it would have gone in the other direction. There still would have had to be a new candidate identified by the Republican National Convention. So things would have gone differently from that day.
Very interesting. So going back to the shed, the person's come out of the shed. They understand this idea of perspective and perception. What I'm really trying to get at here is I'm trying to help people get out of the life they're living that they hate and closer towards a life that is aligned in whatever way they define alignment as, so that they can live the life they want to live, so they can start to kind of bend the world in their favor. And I use this term bend the world intentionally because it's something that I've come to learn in the entrepreneurs that I've met and just the people that seem to have the most power. They understand that the world they live in is malleable. And maybe that's the analogy of being able to break out of your shed. But they understand that they can like have an idea, pursue the thing, and kind of convince their way to a goal, bend the world out of their way. And that's kind of what I want to equip the people that are listening right now with, that ability to kind of bend the world out of your way or to the shape in which you want it to be.
I've got two things that come to mind, right? The first is there's this lesson that I learned at CIA that I still teach now in my training with executives and individuals and entrepreneurs, where CIA warns us not to get trapped in what's called the perfection paradox. And the perfection paradox is not the same thing as perfectionism. The perfection paradox is the idea that you keep making incremental improvements to a plan, but you never actually act on the plan. So you're seeking perfection and you're making genuine improvements, but you're not actually taking action. So the impact of your improvements is not felt. So they warn us against getting trapped in this perfection paradox. Because you can imagine if you're planning an operation for whatever, it's very, very easy to just start, how do we make it this 5% better? How do we make it 2% better? How do we make it 1% better? What if tomorrow's intelligence gives us new information? What if intelligence the next day gives us better information? So you get trapped in this paradox. And instead, what they tell us to do is engage in something called excellence through execution. Excellence through execution is the idea that by executing, you will make mistakes. And then you will improve upon the mistakes because you will execute again. So your excellence comes from execution. After 9/11, as a simple example, after 9/11, President Bush declared war. People were immediately deployed to the mountains of Afghanistan and Pakistan, immediately. Did they plan an operation? Yes, in about 48 hours. And then they were deployed. And then you had paramilitary people on horseback with mules carrying stuff through the mountains. The only way that's possible is through excellence through execution. Get them on the ground and let them figure it out from there. Because the stakes are so high, the impact has to be felt right now. So to your question, how do we give people the ability to bend the rules, bend the world around them? It's understanding that there is excellence in execution and also understanding that there is a paradox with perfection. So if you want to feel the impact, you can't keep planning. You have to take action. And you have to understand that the action you take may only be 20% of what it will be one day. But today, you take the lumps, you make the mistakes, and you get the impact that you need. The second thing that came to my mind is actually coming from I have a centimillionaire client that I work with frequently. And he was talking about this idea of
centimillionaire. I've never had that term before.
Yeah,
I know what it is.
Yeah. I have a centimillionaire client who was working with me on a process to try to resolve some of the challenges that he was having from the trauma that was wired in him as a kid, right? And how that trauma has played out in his personal life and his business life and everything else. And he made this awesome breakthrough where he was like, therapists and counselors and spouses, because he's been married more than once, they all tell you to go through your pain, right? It's like, you've got to face your trauma. You've got to go through it. You've got to do the work. You've got to bear the burden so that you can heal. Whereas what I teach, which is what CIA teaches, is why would you ever go through something when you can go around it? So if you're trying to accept or recover or understand and heal the fact that your mom cheated on your dad when you were 7, you can't change it. By working through it, you might come to accept it, but what's the point? Instead, you can just go right around that pain and you can be like, my mom cheated on my dad. And because of that, this happened. And because of that, this other thing happened. And because of that, I became a self-sufficient, independent person who didn't rely on my mom or my dad. And now I'm very successful. Because all that matters is what's forward. I can't change what's behind. And he made this revelation on his own. I thought it was such a powerful visual because we so often think that the point from here to here, if there's all this mess in the middle, you have to go through the mess. When in fact, you can also just go around the mess and you can go right to the point. And you don't have to heal. You just have to accept, understand, recognize, and move forward.
And so what did he do? So he was trying to overcome his trauma. How does he go around it in that specific example?
Well, so in that specific example, he went back to the traumatic incident that he experienced. And what he realized is that if his mom hadn't cheated on his dad, then the domino effect that would have come after that would have probably never led to him starting the business that ultimately made him an ultra high net worth. And once he made that connection, he was like, oh, well, shit, I'm glad my mom cheated on my dad, because now my daughters are taken care of, my sons are taken care of, my wives are taken care of, I've got 500 employees that are taken care of. I do business in 4 different countries. Everybody's taken care of.
Does that require some time, though, between the thing that happened and where you are now? Because, I was sat here yesterday with a chap who lost his son, his 18-month-old son, in April. And, it's hard to, in that situation, Francis Ngannou, who's a UFC champion, hard in that situation to try and find a way around it. It's a couple of months ago.
There's no way around tragedy. That's loss that very few of us will ever know, thankfully. What we don't know is how that will shape him in the future. Mm-hmm. All we know is what that's doing to hurt him in the present, right? Think about all the famous stories, all the famous inspirational, motivational leaders that you've met who had some kind of tragedy happen in the past.
Well, actually, funnily enough, because I mentioned the loss of a son, I had a guy sat here called Mo Gaudat, who was the ex-head of Google X, and his son passed away in a routine operation that should have taken 10 minutes, but killed his son. And then he quit his job at Google and went on search of what happiness is. And when I asked him on the podcast, I said, would you bring back your son now? He said no. Like, if you could go back and, well, I'm sure he'd bring back his son. I think what he's saying to me is that if you could go back and change what happened, would he change it? And he said no.
It's important. It's important to understand when you are wired for success, because not everyone is wired for success. A lot of people are wired for mediocrity. A lot of people are wired for basic survival. A lot of people are wired for pain and suffering. But when you are wired for success, you can't regret what's happened to you in the past, because to erase it or change it would be to make you not the person you are now, and the person you are now is successful.
Do you think some people are wired for success?
Absolutely, I think people are wired for success.
What does that mean in real terms? How do I know if I'm wired for success?
I think empirically, there's lots of proof that you're wired for success.
But I'm talking about, Dave that's listening to this now, or Janet, how do they know that if they're wired for success?
So what I have found pretty consistently, not only in clients that I work with, but also in the actual CIA field operations that I've engaged in, right? And it's important that the reason I compare clients to spies is because what spies are people who are living in a shed looking through a window and realize there's something else on the other side. You can't find a happy person living in ignorance in their shed and convince them that it's a good idea to commit treason against their country. You can't, because they're very happy. Once somebody's very happy and very satisfied, they don't aspire to anything. So you can't goad them into telling you secrets or pay them or trick them or force them, because they're very satisfied where they are. So a spy is an asset in the field, is somebody who believes that there might be something better. A actual client wired for success also believes that there is something better. The difference between the two is that this person can be manipulated.
Which person?
The spy in the field who's desperate to get out of the shed, that person can be manipulated. Whereas a good client is suspicious and aware that people are trying to manipulate them. So they're looking for guidance. They're looking for something they can test. They're looking for something they can prove, right? So that's why I compare the two so closely. both are wired to be successful because they already know that there is more than just the world around them. They already know that there is something limiting them. They already know that there's a barrier. And by being aware that there is a barrier, that makes them want to cross or break the barrier. That's what being wired for success means. It means that you know that there's something holding you back and you want to overcome the thing that's holding you back.